Yeah, that's right. What is it? Okay, so I live in Nova Scotia. Who can tell me? Who can stand up and tell me where Nova Scotia is? You guys, besides the fact that it's in Canada, I know it's in Canada. Who can tell me where Nova Scotia is? To the right. Oh, this is going to be a long. Oh, this is last. Okay, so the rest that are here, if you want one, when we're dead, you can come up and get one. Okay? Yeah. Hey man, I'm the giver of the gifts. I can give them the way I want, right? I know, it makes you think. Nova Scotia is on Canada's Atlantic coast. It's about 500 miles north of Maine. It's right on the Atlantic Ocean. That's where I live. All right, great. You see that? You guys now know the capital of Canada? You know we have 10 provinces and 3 territories? You know where Nova Scotia is? Who knows the name of our Prime Minister? We don't have a president, we have a Prime Minister.
Jesus.
No, Jesus is my Lord. He is not my Prime Minister. Our Prime Minister, his name is Stephen Harper. Okay, there's your Canadian lesson for the day. You guys now know a lot more about Canada than you did a little while ago. All right, so anyway, guys, thank you for having me here today. I really appreciate it. Yeah, my name is Guy Hammond. I'm the evangelist for the church in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And small church, it's actually, I sound really loud. Am I as loud as I think I am? Okay. I'm like, holy smokes, turn the guy down. Is it that bad? Okay. Anyway, Halifax, the church there has about 60 people in it, but it's one of the most isolated churches in North America. The next closest church to us is a 12-hour drive away. You can either go to Portland, Maine, or you can go to Quebec City. So it's a small church, very isolated, and my wife and I have been living there for about 9 years. But being an evangelist is only one of the things that I do. I started this ministry here called Strength in Weakness Ministries. I started that ministry about 6 years ago. And the ministry's got 3 purposes. The first purpose is to help Christians who come from a homosexual background, but who as disciples still live with unwanted same-sex attractions. The other goal we have is to help families who have an immediate family member who's involved in the gay life. And then the third thing is, as was announced in the introduction, I travel all over the world teaching on this subject because, this is a really hot-button subject. It's all over the place. It's in your news, especially here in the United States. Your Supreme Court just passed a couple of laws that about gay marriage, and so it's a really big issue here, especially in the United States. Not so big in Canada. Gay marriage has been completely legal in Canada for the last 10 years, and Canada is a much more liberal society than the United States. So it hasn't. We're not in the same place as you guys are on it. But anyway, what's happening is that because it's such a big issue all over the world right now, churches are saying, "Well, hey, listen, we need to learn about this because we want to have a credible response." Where we can, know how to answer people, know how to speak about this intelligently. We don't want to insult people. We don't want to hurt people's feelings. But we also want to be able. We also don't want to have to lower the biblical sexual ethic and what the Bible talks about this issue. We want to be able to speak about it from that level too. So how do we do this? And so I travel all over the world speaking about that and helping people with that. And that's what's going on there. Believe it or not, as was announced, I come from a gay background. I lived as a gay man until I was 24 years old. And I know this will sound crazy, but I started actually participating in homosexual activity at the tender age of 11. And that continued all through my teen years and into my early 20s. Had a boyfriend for 10 years. And then in my early 20s, I moved away from the town that I was growing up in. And moved to Toronto, and there joined the gay community and was involved in the gay community in downtown Toronto for a couple years. And, I didn't really have a moral issue with it. I mean, I did deep down in my heart, I knew that it wasn't right, but that wasn't the thing that propelled me to go to church. Actually, what happened was when I was invited to church, I just knew there was a lot of contradictions in my life. There was a lot of things that weren't representative of what God would want me to be living like. And I just knew there was a lot of things I wasn't happy with. So when I was invited to go to church, I thought, I'm going to check that out. I was hesitant because I thought pretty sure as soon as these people recognized that I was gay and I was living an active gay life and I had a boyfriend and whatnot, they probably wouldn't want me to be coming. But in fact, what I found was that the church was incredibly warm and friendly and hospitable and kind, and I was so moved by the lessons I was hearing and everything else. I was like, wow, maybe this is actually a safe place for me to be able to come and learn about God and ask these kinds of questions about sexuality and how they relate to faith, and let me try to figure this stuff out. I was at first pretty certain that I was just going to hear this message of, you just got to repent or you're going to go to hell, and I thought I was going to hear that kind of stuff, but that's not the message I was hearing. What I was hearing was something that really talked about just the love and mercy and grace of Jesus. And I thought, I'm going to stick around here. So I ended up going to church for about 2 years. And over that 2-year span, the Christians were really kind to me, very loving towards me, very hospitable. They had me in their house for lunch or dinner. And I'd hang out with their families. And we became great friends. And that totally blew me away because I was like, well, you guys know that I am gay, right? Like, you do realize how I've been living my life. You guys want me in your house. You want to hang out with me. You want me to be a part of this. And that really took me off guard. And over a period of 2 years of going to church and hearing the messages and finding out about Jesus and seeing what the Bible was saying and whatnot, eventually I came to a point where I said, okay, you know what, I'll study the Bible. Because over the couple of years, people were bugging me, like, are you going to study the Bible? And I was like, I'm just not ready yet. Finally got to a point where I was like, okay, teach me this stuff. And so anyway, I finally ended up becoming a Christian 2 years after first going to church. And that was it. I left my gay life behind forever. And that was 26 years ago. And I have not participated in any kind of homosexual activity since the day I got baptized 26 years ago. So I really did leave that life behind forever. And then something really crazy happened, because I knew when I was becoming a Christian, I would just have to be making some decisions for the rest of my life that I'd have to be fine with. Like, for instance, I knew, because I'm a gay man, hey, I am never going to be able to get married. Like, how is that going to happen? And, sure enough, after a couple of years, I ended up falling in love with a beautiful Christian woman. And we've been now married for 22 years. In fact, I'll show you a picture of my family. There we are there. And my kids hate this picture because it's actually a few years old, and they're a lot bigger than that now, but I like it because I look good in that picture, so that's the one I keep showing. But anyway, Ellie and Wyatt, Ellie is sitting beside me there, and my son Wyatt with my arm around him. They are now 19 and 18. Like I said, that picture's a little old. But anyway, Ellie is a disciple in Toronto. My son Wyatt lives at home. Avid hockey player. It's about the only thing he's interested in. And then the other two kids, Greg and Kristen, we adopted them. We adopted Greg and Kristen about 6 years ago when they were 9 and 10 years old. And Greg and Kristen unfortunately come from a really abused background. Their dad was a junkie, and there was a lot of drug abuse and alcohol abuse and physical abuse and mental abuse and even some sexual abuse. So when they came to us, they were in pretty bad shape. In fact, they were almost like toddlers, in the sense that even though they were 9 and 10 years old, they had never brushed their teeth. They didn't know how to hold a fork. They couldn't tie their shoes. They didn't know how to tell time. They came to us in pretty rough shape. But anyway, they've been a part of our family now for 6 years, and we love them to death. It's been challenging at times, though. There's been a lot of doctors and therapists and medications, and that's just for me. And then we get stuff for them too. And but we're a happy family. We love each other. But see, that is a miracle to me, what God did for my life, because I never thought that was ever going to be possible, that I'd ever be able to have a family. But not only did God bless me there, but He kept going, because over the years I ended up going to the full-time ministry, and I became an evangelist, and I lead a church in Canada now. And these are just all things that I never ever thought would be possible in my life, and I totally give God the glory for that. Here's the reality. in spite of thousands of hours of praying and begging and crying and studying and trying to figure it out, the truth is that I'm still just as same-sex attracted or as homosexually attracted today as when I became a Christian 26 years ago. So that didn't leave me when I got baptized, and it's never changed. What has changed is I don't live that way anymore. I choose to live a different life, and have for 26 years. But same-sex attraction is still a reality in my life. And I don't know why God works the way He does. If I was God, I would have done things very differently. But the truth is that God says to me, Guy, my grace is sufficient for you, and my power is made perfect in weakness. And you know what? I love you. I think you're incredible. And my personal opinion at this stage of my life is that I don't think God cares what I'm attracted to. I know that the world puts this big thing on sexual orientation. My personal belief is I don't think God stays up late and worries about it. I don't think He cares. The opposite of homosexuality for me is not... the opposite of homosexuality for me is not heterosexuality. The opposite of homosexuality for me is holiness. And I spent a lot of years trying to go from being same-sex attracted to opposite-sex attracted. I thought, well, that's what's got to happen. I mean, in order for me to be right before God, and in order for me to be happy, and in order for me to be at peace, I mean, this has got to change. I tried so many different things. I read, I studied, I went to conferences and workshops, and I did everything I could trying to figure this thing out. And I couldn't find the answers, and I wasn't sure how to change it. And actually, when I went into the ministry, and I'll tell you, I spent a lot of years actually, even in the church, just very ashamed and embarrassed of it. Certainly my wife knew. I wasn't going to surprise her with that the day we got married. Like, do you take Guy to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. Hey, by the way, I'd like to tell you something, you know. I didn't do that to her. She knew before we got married my baggage and where I was coming from. But besides that, except for a few people in the church, because, you know, we teach you've got to be open and transparent and with your life, and that's important. So there was always people who knew what was going on. But beyond that, this just wasn't something I was going to talk about. And so anyway, I just thought, you know, when I was living in the world before becoming a Christian, I was the butt end of a lot of people's jokes. People would laugh and make fun of gay people all the time. I heard those jokes. I lived that way. I know what it's like to be on the opposite end of that. And I thought, if I tell people in the church too, and I start hearing those jokes in the church, that will just kill me. So I'm just going to stay quiet. I'm not going to tell everybody that this is who I am. But I ended up. I was trying to figure out how to you know, go from being homosexually attracted to heterosexually attracted. And so I thought, well, our church doesn't have a lot to offer in this area. Like, where do you go? Who do you get help from? And some people in the church tried to help me, but their advice and their thoughts were pretty simplistic. You know, I'd hear things like, well, bro, you just need to pray harder. You need to have more faith. Somebody told me once, this is the dumbest thing I ever heard, I need to wear looser pants. Like, really? I didn't think my pants were that tight, but okay. Somebody told me, you know, you need to go on more dates. I'm like, really? That's your answer? You think that the way I'm going to go from being homosexually attracted to heterosexually attracted is that I'm going to go on more dates? You think that's the answer? And so I appreciated the fact that people were trying to help me. But, you know, as I said, the help wasn't really all that helpful. So I thought, I got to go to some other places. So I remember once driving for 18 hours from Toronto to Philadelphia to an organization that was there that claimed that they could help you go from being homosexually attracted to heterosexually attracted. I didn't want to tell anybody that I was going there because I was too embarrassed to have to tell people where I was actually going. So I just lied. I said to my wife and other people in the ministry, yeah, I just need a few days off. I need to get away. And so I rented a car and I drove 18 hours to Philadelphia to go to this meeting. Went there, sat in the meeting for 2 hours, realized, yeah, there's not a lot of help here. Drove home completely disappointed. I used to gather as much information as I could, books and pamphlets and stuff on the internet, and I had this steel briefcase, but I was way too terrified for anybody to know about my steel briefcase, because I had all my stuff in it. Nothing wrong, nothing inappropriate, all things that I thought would help me. But where do you leave this information? You can't leave it on the coffee table when people come over. Oh, God, what's this stuff about how to become heterosexually attracted? Like, you know, you can't let anybody see that. So I would have this steel briefcase. I had locks all over it, and I had it hidden away in the back of the house. I didn't think anybody would know what was there. And whenever my wife and kids would go out, I'd get that briefcase out, and I'd unlock it, and I'd read all the information I could. And when my family would come home, I'd put it all away and hide it again. And That's just how I lived for a lot of years, trying to figure this thing out. And then one day, Doug Jacoby, somebody you've probably heard of before, invited me to go and speak at a workshop that he was holding in Washington, D.C. And the topic he gave me was homosexuality in the church. I was like, what? He was calling me from Russia one day. He said, will you come and speak on homosexuality in the church? I was like, what are you talking about? Are you crazy? I can't talk about that. I felt insulted. I felt manipulated. And I was like, who on earth would have told Doug Jacoby that, I used to live a gay life and that I'm same-sex attracted? How would he have heard that? So I was trying to figure out who squealed on me and who told. And I was totally upset. And so I was so mad I hung up on him. And he called back a few minutes later and he said, what is your problem? I was like, I can't believe you would ask me to speak about this. Don't you know how embarrassing it is and how awkward it is and how ashamed I am? And I can't speak at a conference and talk about that. He was like, what are you talking about? I was like, that I used to be gay. He was like, you were? I was like, yeah, why didn't you call me? He said, well, I needed somebody to speak on this topic and I couldn't find anybody else who would. And we needed a Canadian because I got all these Americans on my roster. So I thought, I'll get a Canadian. And I know who you were, so I thought I'd invite you. So I ended up going to that thing, speaking about it, came home, and I thought, you know what, this is crazy. I'm an evangelist. I'm supposed to be helping people. And I'd never heard anyone else stand up and say that they were same-sex attracted. As far as I knew, I was the only one in the church. Now, I knew statistically that couldn't be real. But I felt like I was the only one because I'd never heard anybody else talk about it before. And I thought, this is crazy. Who cares what I did 20 years ago? If people have got a problem about things that I did 20 years ago, I'm not the one with the problem. They're the one with the problem. And so I'm going to go and see how I can start helping people. So my wife and I started this ministry. And that's what we've been doing for the last 6 years. And strengthandweakness.org. So there's a ton of helps available on there. And a lot of it's available. You can just educate yourself on it. But when I started this thing, my goal was to find 30 people. I thought, if I could just find 30 people in our churches who's same-sex attracted, man, that would be amazing. But the reality is, in the last 6 years, we've helped over 1,000 Christians from 137 churches in over 50 different countries around the world. And so this thing has just turned into something a lot bigger than I ever anticipated. I feel like I'm in front of a speeding train trying not to get run over. But we're helping teens, campus students, young, old, white, Caucasian, Asian, whatever. I mean, it's unbelievable what has happened in the last... White and Caucasian are the same thing, aren't they? And see, yeah, you guys didn't know where Ottawa was, but you knew that. Okay, so anyway, that's what I'm doing, and I'm going around teaching about this stuff. So anyway, that's why I'm here. That's my story, and that's the deal there. So let's talk about this a little bit. And then, as I said, when I'm done, I'll open it up for some questions. If you've got questions, if you don't, that's fine. But this is a safe place for you to be able to ask whatever you want as we go through this stuff. So here's the first thing I want to tackle. Is homosexuality a sin? Is it a sin? Well, yeah, it's a sin. I'll show you the scriptures in a second as to why God thinks it's a sin. It is a sin. The question is, why is it a sin? Why would God allow there to be something like that and then call it a sin? And I'll also tell you, by the way, here's where I've landed on this, and here's why I don't stay up late worrying about what I'm attracted to anymore. Why I don't think God cares. Let's say I did go from being... Let's say I had this zap moment, right? And I was lying in bed tonight and all of a sudden, boom, what happens? I wake up tomorrow morning and hey, wow, I'm actually attracted to girls now. Let's say that happened. I guess that would be okay, but you know what? Wouldn't I be just trading one set of temptations for another set of temptations? Amen. So if I've got to face these kinds of temptations, and every day I've got to deny myself and follow God and submit myself to Him, but then I get these kinds of temptations and I've got to deny myself and submit myself to God, then what is the difference? So, I'm done worrying about it. My wife loves me. My kids love me. I've got a couple good friends that love me. Jesus loves me. I'm going to heaven. It's not a salvation issue. I don't see anywhere in the Bible that says if you struggle with homosexual temptations that you're lost and going to hell. So if it's not a salvation issue and my friends and family love me, then what do I care? I live a very happy life. I've got a great marriage. I've got no complaints, so it's fine with me. But let's get back to this. Is homosexuality a sin? Well, yeah, it is. What does the word sin actually mean? Does anybody know? Yeah, it means miss the mark. Sin just means that you're going to miss the mark. So what are we missing the mark of? Well, we're missing the mark of how God wants us to live. And when anyone, I'm telling you, when anyone turns to homosexuality to find companionship or self-worth or to feel better about themselves or to self-medicate, and this goes for anything, not just homosexuality, but anything that's outside of what God wants us to do, they're just missing the mark of what it is that God has laid out for them. So here's a good way to describe it. Let's use a car as an example. This car had a designer and an architect, a whole group of people who came together to design exactly what this car is for. And the car has very specific specifications. And, one of the specifications was not that the car swims. That is never what the designers intended that car to do. The car can do incredible things, but one of the things that car cannot do is swim. So if your car ever decides to drive itself into the pool, you should try to avoid that from happening, because that will not help the car. All that does is ruin the car. Why? Is there anything wrong specifically with swimming? Well, for you and I, no, but for that car, yes! That car shouldn't be in the pool, because it wasn't designed for that. And so what happens is now that car is ruined. It's participating in something that is not representative of what the designers created it to be. So now the car is ruined, and it's going to suffer the consequences of that. What about parking your truck inside of your bedroom? Well, if you have a driveway in your bedroom, I guess that would be fine. But, if your car decides to go right through your wall and land into your bedroom, that is not cool. Why? Well, because the people who designed that car, or that truck, did not design it to go through walls into someone's bedroom. So, there's consequences involved for using that vehicle in a way that is not representative of how the architect and the designers designed it to be. So the car in the pool and the car in the side of that wall have both missed the mark. They're both capable of doing incredible things, but being in water and going through the side of a house are not two of them. So when you go outside of what it is the designer created, you get hurt, you ruin yourself, you fall apart, and you suffer consequences. Well, that is the exact same way of missing the mark with homosexuality or anything else for that matter. If I go ahead and live my life in such a way that is not how the designer made me, then I'll suffer the consequences for that. So, when I was living my gay life, it is not how God wanted me to live. It's not sin in the sense that you just got to stop, you just got to repent. It's deeper than that. It's understanding that we have a designer, we have an architect. God created you in a very specific way. And so He made you in this way, and He says to you, listen, here's how I made you. Now let me tell you the best ways to treat yourself, the best way to treat other people. And I'm going to give you this book called the Bible, and it's the instruction booklet, and it will tell you how to live your life. Because I'm the architect. I'm the one who designed you and made you. I know what makes you work. I know what will make you happy. I know what will make you fulfilled. I know what will make you successful. So if you just follow this guidebook and live according to this, you'll be successful. If not, and you decide to drive your life through a wall somewhere, you will suffer the consequences of that. And I don't want you to do that to yourself. So would you just please follow the instruction booklet? Don't miss the mark. Well, I spent a lot of years missing the mark in my sexual life. See, and here let me throw this one in for free. A lot of people, most people think that homosexuality has to do with sex. The truth is, homosexuality has very little to do with sex. Homosexuality is not a sexual issue. It's a relational issue. People are trying to get very legitimate, emotional, and relational needs met in very illegitimate ways. I'll give you the really shortened version, and there's so many different contributing factors as to why somebody becomes gay. Is there a genetic cause for it? Are people born this way? I know that's a big question. Here's the truth. Science has not provided an answer. There's no genetic gene that is proved to be the sole cause of homosexuality. But the Bible doesn't speak to it either. The truth is, I'm actually open to the idea that maybe there's a gay gene. I don't know, they haven't found it yet. I do believe there could be some genetic leanings that may take somebody in that direction, but the silver bullet gay gene that says, yeah, this is the thing that makes you homosexual, well, science hasn't proved that yet. But here's the reality. For the Christian, it doesn't matter. What does it matter if there's a gay gene? Let's say they discover one. Do you think that because they discover a gay gene that says, hey, I was actually born this way, all of a sudden I now get to live any way I want, so I'm going to go cheat on my wife and lose my family and lose my job and go get involved in homosexuality again? That would be ridiculous. It's like anything else. Let's say they discover a lying gene. And all of a sudden you find out, wow, you can lie anytime you want because now there's a gene for it. And so there's a genetic reason as to why you lie. Nowhere in the Bible does it say, thou shalt not lie. Unless, of course, there's a genetic reason, in which case you don't lie your brains out. It doesn't say that anywhere in the Bible. It doesn't matter whether there's a genetic cause or not. So for me, who cares if there's a genetic cause? If there is, great. I'm still going to be obedient to God. If there's not, great. I'm still going to be obedient to God. What's the difference? So I personally don't believe that there's a genetic cause. Whether there is or not, I'm sure over time we'll find out. But I do know this. God says, I did not create humans in my design of sexuality. I did not design humans to be involved in homosexuality. That is like driving your vehicle through the side of a wall. There is a design I created. I'm the architect. I made you a certain way. But that is not it. And so if you go from the design that I created, you'll suffer consequences for it. And I'll speak about this a little bit more in a few minutes, but I can tell you, I believe homosexuality is the greatest lie perpetrated on mankind in the history of the world. Because I lived that way for a lot of years. And I can tell you, it ain't all that. It did work for a little while. It did satisfy different needs in my life. It gave me a safe community. It gave me somebody to have a relationship with. I felt secure there. I wasn't the butt end of people's jokes in that community. But I can tell you what. Let me tell you what. Compared to Jesus, there is no comparison in terms of being able to get your emotional, relational, and spiritual needs met compared between Jesus and homosexuality. No comparison whatsoever. That's another reason why I would never go back. If they ever said, hey guy, there's a genetic cause for this, now do what you want, I'd be like, are you kidding? Why on earth would I go back to that? Like, I won the lottery spiritually. You think I'm going to go back to that? That's ridiculous. So anyway, if you're wondering how homosexuality misses the mark, those are the main scriptures that talk about it. Okay? There's not a lot. There's really 5. You can argue with a few others that kind of talk about it in an offhand way. You can probably look at 7 scriptures. There's not a lot, granted. But the Bible makes it clear in 2 different testaments, in 2 different languages, spread over thousands of years. 5 times the Bible says this misses the mark. If this is how you live your life, this will miss the mark. It's not because I want you to be miserable. It's not because I don't want you to enjoy your life. It's because I designed you to be a certain way. And if you involve yourself in this kind of activity, you will miss the mark. You will not feel as fulfilled and as happy as I designed you to be. This is not just the case with homosexuality. Any kind of sexual activity outside the confines of marriage, the Bible says, is inappropriate. It is not. It misses the mark. It's not a part of what God wants. So you got to think about your own life. It doesn't matter whether you've ever been involved in homosexuality or not. We're all sexual beings. We all get involved in relationships of one kind or another. You've got to ask yourself, how can you tell whether or not you are involved in a relationship that is what God would want or is not what God would want? How can you tell whether or not you're involved in a relationship that misses the mark or doesn't miss the mark? Well, I want to give you a good guideline to follow. This is a quick and easy way for you to be able to assess and go, yeah, this is cool, or no, this isn't cool. Now, sometimes it's really obvious and you shouldn't have to think very long about it. But just in case you need a guideline to help you, here's a good one. There's a book in the Bible called the Song of Songs. It's probably not a book that you spend a lot of time looking at. It's in there. It was written by Solomon. It's an amazing book. But, it's probably one of the ones you've not spent a lot of time looking at. But it really provides us with some insight on how to tell if the relationships that we are in are what God would want or not. And what this book does, the Song of Psalms, is that it's really a magnificent love story. And in the midst of this beautiful, poetic language, we see all the stages laid out before us of what romantic love is. And it's a complicated book to read because the language is so deep and it's so poetic, and I'm not a poetic guy at all. It's just not my gig. So it's hard to follow for me, but what we see is from the very beginning of a relationship to the very end, when I say the end of the relationship, the beginning of a marriage. I'm not suggesting that when you get married, that's the end of the relationship. Hope my wife's not going to listen to this. Hey, I tell everybody I've been married for 22 years. It's been the best 10 years of my life. Okay. Anyway, not everybody got that. Great. Okay, so anyway, I'll just keep going. No, I've been happily married for all 22 of them. So anyway, what we have then is this initial look. And what happens is in chapter 1, in the Song of Songs, we see the dating going on. And we see that kind of relationship. And then it culminates until you get to the end of chapter 3. And chapter 3 ends with the marriage, with the wedding. And 3 times in this book, as you read through it, we see how it all connects to proper timing. The author says over and over again, in chapter 2 verse 7, in chapter 3 verse 5, and in chapter 8 verse 4, the author says, do not awaken love until it's time. He connects it to proper timing. We want to connect it to just actions. But timing is important. It's not just what you're doing. The question is it involved in the proper timing? We're not just talking about whether it's homosexual or heterosexual, what you're doing when you're with the person that you're involved in this activity with. The question is, what about the timing? It's a timing that's marked by public approval. As you read through this book, what you begin to discover is that public approval of the relationship is really important. And that public approval is heightened and highlighted by the end of chapter 3 on a wedding. So the whole relationship, including the celebration of the sexual aspects, takes place within the context of proper timing and community approval. And in chapter 3 it says that there's rejoicing in the community over this relationship. And so the parents are approving and excited. The spiritual community, the church, is excited and they're approving. And it talks about how by the end of chapter 3, it talks about how the mother is so excited and so approving that she puts a crown on top of the groom on the wedding day. So there's some important things there for us to learn in terms of what a relationship should look like and help you determine whether or not you're involved in a proper relationship or an improper relationship. So for those of you who are dating or who have been involved in a sexual way with somebody, or at the very least involved physically from one degree to another, how can you tell if it's what God desires? How can you tell if it misses the mark or not? Well, ask yourself, according to the Song of Songs and what we just discussed. Ask yourself, do your friends, does your family, does the church celebrate your private sexual encounters? Would there be rejoicing if there was a pregnancy? Of course not. Why not? Because the timing would be wrong. The context is wrong. A private affair is being forced out into the public and is clouded by shame. Why? Because they would have aroused love before its time. What if there's a homosexual episode? Well, there's nothing wrong with homosexuality. Really? Well, if that's the case, then let me ask you this. Would your community, your friends, your family, and your church rejoice and celebrate if they knew you were involved in a homosexual relationship? No, there would be shame and hiding and fear and confusion. So compare that to what we read about in the Song of Songs. The couple's sexual life takes place in the context of a lifelong commitment of marriage. And the community is approving and rejoicing. So one good way to tell, if you're ever wondering, is this relationship good for me or bad for me? Ask yourself, is this something that my parents would approve of? Is this something that my community would approve of? Is this something that the church would approve of? Is this something that people would celebrate if they knew about it? And I think if you use that guide, it'll serve you well. Man, I remember being a teenager and involved in homosexuality. It was confusing, man. I wish somebody would have come to me when I was 16, 17, 18 years old and talked to me about this issue. It was lonely. It was frustrating. I felt like an oddball. I felt strange. I felt weird. I knew that I was different than most other people. I tried so hard to be able to fit in so that I could be like everybody else, but I knew that I was different. It was lonely. It was exhausting. It was a tough way to grow up. And it was like that sometimes in the church too. I think, as I said a few moments ago, my experience has been that homosexuality is the biggest lie ever told on mankind by the devil. And the enemy loves to imitate God. In fact, in 2 Corinthians 11:14 it says that Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. Satan pretends to be something that he's not, and he tries to sell us goods and products that promises a lot. But really what he's doing is he's selling us goods and products that do not deliver. Have you ever seen anything on TV, some commercial or something, and it tells you it'll do A, B, and C? So you think, oh cool, I'll go to Walmart and I'll buy it. And you go there and you bring it home and you're like, this is not the same thing I see on TV. Why is that? This thing doesn't work the way it does on TV. What they did is they sold you a product promising so much and yet actually delivered so little. Well, Satan does that. He takes something that is evil and that will ultimately poison us spiritually, and he makes it appear satisfying and pleasing and fulfilling for the moment. He does that with a lot of stuff. He does that with drugs. He does that with alcohol. He does that with sexual activity. He does that by playing Xbox until your brains fall out. He does that with a lot of different things. This will make me feel better. I'll really enjoy this. This will be great, This is not just this is for everybody, Adults get involved in the most ridiculous things. And all these things are promising that it will make you feel happy. It will make you feel fulfilled. You'll feel better if you involve yourself in this. And that's how Satan plays mind games with humanity. Homosexuality, and you can take it from me because I lived it, homosexuality promises so much and delivers so little. It is not the real thing. It really isn't. So let me illustrate it to you this way. Here we got two products. We've got Coke and we've got water. Who doesn't love an ice cold Coke on a hot sunny day? Okay, some of you don't. Okay, but you get the point. Coke is great. There's a reason why it's probably the most well-known product on earth. And so, it's the leading cola brand for a reason. And, on a hot sunny day, okay, maybe for most of us, except for the few people who said they didn't like it, for most of us, Coke will taste great. And on a hot sunny day, that's what you want to drink. But the effects of Coke, while it may taste great, in terms of it taking our thirst away, is really only short-lived. The truth is, if you use Coke to quench yourself and quench your thirst on a hot sunny day, it won't be very long before you're just thirsty again and you're dying for another Coke or something else to drink. So a study was actually done back in 2006. A study was done to determine what drinking one can of Coke will do to the body within 60 minutes of drinking it. So the study, by the way, pointed out that it's not just Coke that is the culprit, but it's really talking about any soda that's not diet. And in short, here's what the study says that drinking one can of Coke will do to you within 60 minutes. I'm just talking about a regular-sized can of Coke. In the first 10 minutes, 10 teaspoons of sugar hit your system, which, by the way, is 100% of your recommended daily intake. And you don't immediately vomit from the overwhelming sweetness because of the phosphoric acid that cuts the flavor, allowing to keep you down. Your system wants to vomit it up. You ever notice as soon as you're drinking Coke, you want to burp? Right? That's because what your system is saying is actually what we'd like to do is throw all this stuff up, because what are you putting into us? But the phosphoric acid cuts down the taste and the sweetness of it and allows your body to actually keep it in. That happens within the first 10 minutes. In 20 minutes, your blood sugar level spikes, causing an insulin burst. And your liver responds to this by turning any sugar it can get its hands on into fat. In 40 minutes, Caffeine is absorbed completely into your body. Your pupils dilate. Your blood pressure rises. As a response, your liver dumps more sugar into the bloodstream. The receptors in your brain are now blocked by preventing drowsiness. Within 45 minutes, your body ups your dopamine production, stimulating the pleasure centers of your brain. This is physically the same way that heroin works, by the way. And then within 60 minutes, as the rave inside of you dies down, you start to have a sugar crash. And you may become irritable and or sluggish. That absolutely happens to my kids after they drink Coke. And you've also now, by the way, had to have gone to the bathroom and urinate this because your body is so desperate to get the stuff out of your system that probably within 60 minutes you have to urinate. The challenge with that is that when that happens, you now have to urinate all of the good stuff out of your system as well because your body is so desperate to get rid of everything. So here's the challenge with that. You don't need to read that study or hear the results of that study to know that Coke is not good for you. We all already knew that Coke isn't good for you. I mean, you can put a rusted penny into Coke and it takes the rust right off, right? I mean, you don't feed Coke to your bird or to your animals. I mean, right, but we'll drink it. And then, it's not like you're just going to drink a small can. If you go to the movie theater, at least in Canada, they give you a cup about this big, and you sit there and you gulp this stuff back. I mean, just think, if that was what one can of Coke does you within 60 minutes, can you imagine one of those big slurpy things? I mean, man, your whole body is like going into shock, right? It's unbelievable. And then some of us will have 2 or 3 of those in a day. Not me, but yeah, okay, sometimes I do. Okay, so the truth, though, is you didn't need to hear all of that to recognize that Coke is not good for you. You already knew that. So the question then becomes, if we already knew the stuff isn't good for us and it's going to do all this stuff to our bodies, why do we still go ahead and drink it? We drink it because it tastes great and it takes away our thirst. That's why. But it only lasts for a little while and then we're thirsty again. So Coke actually works. It does. It tastes great and it takes the thirst away for a little while. But the benefits are short-lived. That is what homosexuality is like. It works, but it only works for a little while. And then you're just thirsty again. And even though you may have a moral issue with it, even though inside you may know and believe it's not right, bad love is better than no love at all. And if it's the only thing you're used to and the only thing that you've grown up believing that is available to you and you think it's the only option you have, then you will keep going back to that. So I started participating in homosexuality when I was 11. Guess what? By the time I'm in my mid-20s, it was the only option I thought I had available to me. It was the only thing I knew. And so it was something I just kept going back to. But it always left me thirstier. It always left me feeling like I needed more. It never worked long term. So there's a story in the Bible that really describes that. And it's in John chapter 4. And in John chapter 4 we read this story of a woman who Jesus meets at a well. And what happens is that she's been involved in all these relationships. And Jesus comes to her and says, "Hey, do you want a drink?" Or Jesus says, "Will you give me a drink?" And the woman says, "Yes." So they come up with this conversation. And it turns out through the conversation that Jesus finds out that she's been involved in all these different relationships. And Jesus says to her, "Listen, why are you going around to all these different guys? Let me give you water where you'll never be thirsty again." And the woman is like totally freaked out, like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "I'm telling you that you will never be relationally or emotionally thirsty again if you drink the water that I want to give you. In other words, I'm going to give you the pure, clean drinking water. The stuff that you've been going to, relationship to relationship to relationship to relationship to relationship to, by the time Jesus gets to her, she's on her 6th. And Jesus says, this stuff will only leave you thirsty. It's like drinking polluted water. If it's the only water you know, you'll keep drinking the polluted water. But I'm telling you, I want to give you pure, clean drinking water. And it'll take away your thirst forever." So we know what Coke does, but we also know what water does. And water, you're not thirsty anymore. We know it takes care of you. You don't get sick. You don't get the phosphoric acid. Your body isn't hyperventilating because you drank some water. It's actually good for you. And Jesus says that is the difference between sin, between the stuff that makes you miss the mark, and what it is that Jesus offers. And that was the difference for me between homosexuality and finding Jesus. And, you know, let me tell you something. Let me tell you why I ended up leaving homosexuality. It wasn't because somebody was able to prove to me that homosexuality was so bad. And this is one of the keys to helping your friends. If you ever want to talk about Jesus with anybody who's gay, here's the key. Don't spend your time trying to convince them how terrible homosexuality is. Because to them it isn't. The truth is homosexuality works. The truth is homosexuality is meeting some very legitimate needs in their lives. But just in a very illegitimate way. And in such a manner that only meets their needs for a short amount of time. But it is meeting needs. So don't try to tell people what you're against. Don't try to tell people how bad homosexuality is. What you've got to do is try to convince them how amazing Jesus is. You don't convince them to find out about God and investigate God by telling them how terrible and sinful and wicked and evil they are by participating in homosexuality. What you've got to do is you've got to prove to them how amazing Jesus is. And so I'll even say to people when I find out they're gay, I'll say, wow, I understand, I get it. I understand why you'd be involved in homosexuality. I know that has met a lot of needs in your life. I understand completely. But let me tell you something. There is something that will meet your emotional and relational and spiritual needs in a way that homosexuality never can. And while I understand that homosexuality has worked in a lot of ways for you, I'm telling you, there's something else out there that will do so much better. It's like this, guys. Let's say we had, two different kinds of soap. You've got brand A, let's call it Tide. They advertise that it takes away the stains out of your clothes and makes your clothes smell nice. And you got brand B. What's another kind of soap? What do we got? We got Tide and we got Dawn. Okay, it's an American product. Okay, we got Tide and we got Dawn. Okay, so let's say you're using Tide all the time and you're like, well, I know it takes out the stains and makes my clothes feel good. Well, if I have to convince you that Dawn is so much better, I can't just convince you by telling you what a loser you are by using Tide. I have to be able to convince you that Dawn is so much better. But if I can convince you for the same price point, if you were to just try Dawn, you would discover that it takes out the stains in a much better way. Your clothes smell significantly better than Tide ever did. And I was able to convince you to try it. Excuse me. And you actually did. And you discovered that Dawn was that much better. Then you would switch. It works the same way with trying to tell people about Jesus. I'm not trying to relegate Jesus into being a product, but hey, listen, we can't just tell people what we're against and why it is what they're doing is wrong all the time. Sometimes you've got to stand up and tell people what it is that you're for. And we've got to do a better job telling people why Jesus is so much better than what it is. And this is not just with homosexuality, this is with anything in life. You've got to be able to prove to people why Jesus is so much better. I want to answer a couple of these questions here. What you should do if you... It should say, what should you do if you think you're homosexually attracted? Well, first thing I'll say is, just chill out and calm down. It's not the end of the world. I think we focus way too much on this kind of stuff. I think we put way too much of an emphasis on it. The truth is, if we were to look at our lives like it was a big pie, I use pie because obviously I like pie. If we were to use pie, a big hunk of pie as an example of our lives, the truth is what we're sexually attracted to, what we're emotionally attracted to, is one small piece. Like, honestly, I know it's an important part, but why is that something we've got to focus on and talk about all the time? The truth is, it's not that big of a deal. The truth is that if you are homosexually attracted, okay, well, you know what? There's no reason why you can't live an incredibly happy, successful life that you and your parents and your family wouldn't be incredibly proud of, including God. There's no reason why you can't live a life happily, live a happy Christian life, be a Christian. I've been a Christian for 26 years, and I'm same-sex attracted. It doesn't affect my life. I have to live with some certain boundaries. I have to make some certain decisions on how I live. But you know what? My life's doing awesome. I've got a wife and kids, and I'm successful in my career. It's not that big of a deal. So, the first thing I think you need to do is calm down and realize it's not that big of a deal. How much time have I got left, bro?
About 5 minutes.
5 minutes. There will not be time for questions and answers. How does God feel about same-sex attracted people? I think He loves them. I think He thinks they're amazing. God is not ashamed or embarrassed of same-sex attracted Christians. He is not. How will you be accepted in the church? I think the church needs to be a safe place for people, regardless of what your struggle is, and what your challenge is, and what you're going through. And my personal experience in 26 years of Christianity is that while not everybody has completely understood what I go through, I have found the church to be an incredibly safe place. And, has it always worked out 100%? No, there's no organization on earth where you're treated perfectly all the time. But my experience is that Christians are thoughtful, they're caring, they're loving, and, I think it's been a great experience for me. So if that is your gig and you think, I think this is my challenge in life, do not think to yourself, I can't be a Christian. That's ridiculous. Of course you can be a Christian, and you can live a happy, successful life as a Christian. How to help somebody who's homosexually attracted. The same way you would help anybody else, but here's 3 important nuances. If you're going to help anybody who struggles with homosexuality, you've got to be a safe place. You've got to believe the best about people. Don't pull away. Don't all get freaked out. Don't feel like you can't be their friend. I think you've got to care about people. You've got to let people know, listen, if that's your thing, I'm telling you what, you're my friend. There isn't anything you can tell me that would make me think less of you. I'm here for you, and we'll get through this thing together. But I just think people need to be loved. And how do we tell homosexuals about Jesus? I covered that one already. So, guys, I think my biggest message that I wanted everybody to know is that being same-sex attracted is not the end of the game for the Christian. There's no reason why, if anybody struggles with that, why that needs to be, I can't become a Christian. I hear that too many times from people. I don't think I can become a Christian because I'm same-sex attracted. Get over it, man. It's not that big of a deal, honestly. As I said, you got to live with some certain boundaries, and I can help you do that. But of course, you can live as a Christian with that challenge in your life. We probably have time for one question. Is that cool? Good. Does anybody have a question that they want to ask? All right.
I noticed the bracelet on your right hand is the same one in the picture.
Okay. Absolutely none.
None at all?
No.
Been wearing it for a long time?
Yep.
Are you serious?
That is it. But thank you for that question. I appreciate it. Okay, bro. Great. Hey, guys, if you want to know anything about my ministry, strengthandweakness.org. Go check it out. You'll learn a lot there.
All right, hold on. You're not excused yet. I see a few anxious bodies there. First of all, I want to say thank you to Guy for coming out. Since he has 4 teenage children and we're all about teens and teen camp, we got 4 t-shirts
Awesome.
for his kids.
Bro,
for
thank
camp.
you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Amen.
And one of the things that I really took away, I thought it was amazing. Just all the points. I know that this is a big deal in our church, and it's just a big deal in life. But what I liked is that he drew the parallels that it doesn't matter whether it's homosexuality or any sexual sin is sin. And I loved what he got. I want to definitely study out Song of Songs. It's like, is your relationship appropriate? Are the people around you celebrating it? And that's what I want to give you guys. And, because I think that'll go for all of us. Is the relationships you have in your life something that your friends, your family, that everyone will celebrate? And I'm excited to say that since I've been a disciple, that my family celebrates all of my relationships. And I come from not a homosexual background, but a very just really horrible heterosexual background that I carry a lot of baggage with as well. And so we're brothers. But God has saved us. And now we get to celebrate because our relationship with Jesus makes that so. Amen. Thank you, guys.
Hey, guys, don't forget, if you want a book or an MP3, they're free. They're right there. Please take them. I don't want to take them back to Nova Scotia with me. Okay, bro. Thanks, brother.